Hello, Tom Lavecchia here, and we're here with a very special guest today as we do the continuation of the New Theory podcast. We have Mariah Norris today, who is a best-selling author and literally very insightful on many topics when it comes to women in business. Mariah, how are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine, thank you, Tom. How are you?
Very well. So just we all gotta give her a shout out. We're having some technical difficulties. She's been more than patient. So let's get it underway. So give us your formative years, where you grew up, and what made you you.
Yes, I grew up in Detroit, so I'm born and raised in good old Detroit, and my family really always talked about the investments, always talked about the stock market, and so I knew no gender bias when it came to the investments. And my father, my aunt, and my uncle were all traders as much as they could be. My father had a seat on the commodity exchange, so I didn't know. I wasn't in a formative situation to say this is a corporate man's world in the investment world. So I knew I wanted to go into the field. I love the idea of finding profits for corporate earnings and making money for clients. And so I knew I wanted to go into that field. And I walked into my first interview, which happened to be E.F. Hutton, and I walked in with 95 men that were stockbrokers and
Wow.
no women.
Wow.
And so the only thing that they would offer me was an assistant. So
Oh
I
my
happily
God.
took that because this is a long time ago, and I studied on my own time. They said if you want to study to be an advisor, you do it on your own time. They handed me the books, and I just went about my business and studied. And it was very different back then. When I received my Series 7 exam, there were no there was no congratulations like they did for the guys, and they really didn't know what they were going to do with me. And so the gentleman that I was the gentleman advisors that I was working with, I continued with them for a while, and then started off my own after a few years because they still wanted me to be an assistant, and I wasn't in for that for the long term. So I knew back then that the men had something, an aura of confidence and an expectation that they were offered positions that women weren't. And so I knew right then and there that I wanted to be a success in the business, and I was going to do everything I could to do that. And I found it very, very tough. Fortunately, I have a lot of resilience, but I did look and observe over my 35 years in the trenches to see what was the difference of women that were making it in any corporate business, and what was the difference when they weren't. And I knew that because the programs back then, the MBA programs back in the 80s and the 90s, they basically were really written by men, and they were serving men. And so it's sort of like going into the final game at the end of the year where it's playoffs, and the women go in and say, okay, guys, I want to go I want to go out and change some of the rules so you can accept me more. And they're going to say, well, you know what, that's great, but we're successful anyway, so I really don't want to be bothered. So, I hear you, but adios. So
Wow.
I knew that I needed to make that change, again, to help women. And so what I learned is that we really, in a corporate world, we really have to understand that if we are on a male-dominated area, that women have to be the ones to understand their language. They're not going to stop and listen to new rules. They're just not. And so we have to really come together and help women along the way, so we can bring them to meetings, and so they understand the differences of how a man's not going to take things personally, or how they may be pushed what a woman may feel in an environment that is aggressive, and maybe the woman isn't being heard. And how does a businesswoman get over that and not take it personally, and to keep in the game, and not sit back and say, okay, well, they're pushing me around, so I'm going to lose my self confidence and just go back and maybe leave the business. So I know that that women need to just go out there, and my job is to really help bring these women along, and especially the millennial women, to really bring
Yeah.
them into an area where they are coming out of school, for example, or in their beginning of their career, and they're saying, okay, it's fine. My guy friends are all accepting of me as an equal, and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do business. And we really don't see it that way. The way we walk in there, and all of a sudden, they're walking into meeting four generations of corporate, the corporate world, and a lot of them are on the old school. So how do you get around that, and how do you keep forging forward? So what I did is, in my years of finance, I decided to write a book, and it took me basically 4 years to write the book. It's all about tips and actual exercises to help businesswomen in the male-dominated fields in a no-nonsense guide. It's really, matter of fact. I know we're all busy, so I wanted to put the words down that I felt were going to be very helpful for women and short that are short of time, and to give them exercises and one-liners and how to position themselves physically when they're talking with men. So it's really pretty exciting. So I'm looking forward to helping women as we go through and moving the needle on the level of pay, and moving the needle on more C-suite positions and board of director positions.
Okay, so make sure I'm filtering this all correctly. So finances, even to this day, a male-dominated space. You got it at a time where it was super male-dominated. You persevered. You got through. Not only survived, but we also say strived, and then got to a point where you said, "Hey, enough is enough. I not only want to succeed myself, but I want to help others succeed via your book." So, let's take a second, though, if it's okay, Mariah. Let's take a second. What are some of the obstacles, right? And for millennial women today that they won't face as a sign of progress. So, for example, when you first started, where has at least one or two areas gotten better before we talk about how some things didn't change? What are one of the two things you would say maybe millennial women or maybe won't face or an extinct based off progress? What would you say that is?
I say that millennial women today will walk in, and the progress that they will have is in the very beginning. They have more confidence.
Okay.
Now, but it doesn't last. And what we've seen in studies is that after they're in the business for 3 or 4 years, then there's a change. Then all of a sudden, they're getting into the depth. The higher that they go up on the ladder in the corporate business of whatever business they're in, the tougher it becomes. And that's where they're getting pushback. Let's just say, for example, maybe they want to start a family. They've been in the business for 4 or 5 years, and all of a sudden that will push them back quite a bit, because unless they're with an environment that is supportive for women, having children at home and still running a career, which we all can do, if they're not in that environment, that could be more challenging. But that's what we see, is that in the very beginning, when they're in the very beginning stages, they're fine. It's just when they start climbing that corporate ladder and it gets to like year 4, year 5, and all of a sudden they're dealing with higher levels of competitiveness, higher levels of the alpha personalities, whether it be male or female, and that's when the challenges, what I see the challenges come through.
Okay, so you answered the next question where you said, okay, where it got better, and then it kind of, because there's some systemic issues still, obviously, they'll face those challenges at certain points, whether or not right away, but fairly soon into their career. So that makes sense. What are top line, briefly, what are some of those unspoken truths?
The unspoken truth is that they don't want to change, that the men don't necessarily, in a male environment where, let's say a woman's the only woman in the meeting, right? And they are talking, and they are getting to their point, and they are often running over what a woman is saying. And it happens all the time. And it's one of the biggest frustrations for women. So what the unspoken truth is there is that if she needs to change is how she's positioning it and holding her feet to the fire, and just And when someone is running over her, she needs to say, stop, just hold that thought. I need to complete this, or hold this. I'm not quite done here. We need to talk about this, and we need to push forward on and finish my idea here. So we need to have the one-liners to help these women to get through, because the guys aren't going to stop and say, oh, well, hold on a second. Often women present a little bit differently too. We're more of, we talk, even though we're, the millennials are more sound bites, which is fantastic. It's very helpful in the corporate world. It's still, we still are women, and we will look at things on a more global or more a larger scale, and where the men are just wanting to focus to the bottom line. And so they will not take the time to listen to a woman if she's going into the meeting and saying it in such approach that it's more feminine, or it's look at it this way. One of my great examples is this. You go by a football field, right? I live by a couple of parochial schools, and you see the kids on the weekends. The coaches are coaching the football coach, and they're yelling and screaming at these kids. And the kids are just like, I look at them and I think, is the kid going to be crying? He's basically using pretty much close to a lot of profanity and yelling at this kid. I turn around, the kid's like, okay, no big deal, and blows it off. And if you take that same situation and you moved it over to the soccer field or the softball field, and the women were, the young girls are playing, ball, and if the coach did the same exact setup and really explained the same way and yelled at the kids the same way, the girls would basically be in tears. So it's that conditioning that women have and men have that are so different. And so that's one of the key things that are unspoken, and that women have to understand when they are on that playing field and playing ball with men, whether in the corporate world, that they need to understand how they work, how their minds think, get to that bottom line, and stay in the game and not be pushed back.
Okay. So I was in corporate for 20 years prior to starting my own business, and
I saw that,
yeah, and I call it the next 10K, and I don't know if other people have experienced this, but let's just say you're a female, right, and you're in the professional world, you make it up to a director position. My experience always has been whenever I was ready to walk or whenever I was ready to bounce, just by hook or crook, a next 10K showed up. And what I mean by that is when I wanted to start my own business, I didn't announce it. My boss would be like, "Hey, you're up for promotion. Here's another 10K." And I was ready. I was a little older and more mature, but I wanted to start my own business. Oh, by the way, you got approved for $10,000 more in stock options that invest in 10 months. And there's always that next 10K that would mysteriously show up and always have you chasing, which probably kept me in corporate 5 years longer than I needed to be. Right? What happens if you're a female and you're doing okay? You're making $120. You're a director at a pharmaceutical company, and for the most part you're respected, and you want to stay there, and you want to grow there, and they're treating you well financially. However, there are those unspoken truths. Doesn't get invited to the happy hour, or gets minimized by saying, "Oh, you're one of the guys," and here's like a dirty joke when she makes her uncomfortable. Like, what do you do when you are getting compensated, but you still got to deal with the nonsense? What do you recommend in that case?
Yeah, that's a tough situation that we see every day, and it becomes it's a fine line of still being involved, and when a joke is, for example, is said, it's not okay, and it's just how you handle it, and you would look at that person that said that and said, you know what, that's really for a different crowd, and we're in today's business world, and I'm included, and I didn't appreciate that, and just say that, and then, but don't be like a chip on the shoulder. That's really the thing that we have to deal with, is that we want to be in the game, we want to be talking with the men and being in the group and associating with them as much as we possibly can, because they're our peers. At the same time, you have to draw the line, and you have to just make that boundary. And you make that boundary. You say what you say that's not cool. If I hear that, tell that joke some other time, and then laugh about it and change the subject or turn around. Well, so that has to be said. And once that is said, the other peers will say, hey, that's she wasn't upset about it. She made her statement. and she didn't have a chip on her shoulder, and she turned around and was talking to someone else. So it's really it's tough. But well, let's say if we're not invited to, like, the cigars after work or whatever, I recommend just to go down and still have a drink with the guys, and have one drink and then leave, and but just still be involved. But it's tough, and there is the thing that the difference is, and it is with because it's all about the manager keeping the employees, right?
Correct.
If they have a good employee, they want to keep them, and they still think more about the men. They want to keep the men, and the woman. Well, if she'll get tired, maybe she'll have so many kids that she won't want to work. Maybe her husband's making so much money that she won't want to be working outside the home. I mean, it's there. It's and you have to understand that what's the manager like. And that's really what I recommend for women is when you're looking for a job. One of the things that you would need to weigh out is what is your superior like? Who are you going to be answering to? Are they someone that has a wife at home and never works outside the home, and really doesn't understand the importance of inclusion, or is it someone that understands the importance of inclusion and will include things like lunches or something along those lines that will include the whole peer group?
Okay.
But you have to push. You have to step in. You have to step in. And you can't be afraid, but you have to set your boundaries as well.
Okay.
It's a fine line.
Okay, so new theory is about developing the new theory, and the definition of a father, mother, even employee relationships. For example, millennials believe in a gig economy where they'll go from gig to gig to gig and not necessarily worry too much about pensions and lifetime contracts. So a lot of things are changing, right? However, though, there's certain things that haven't changed biologically. So obviously females could have children, male can't, right? So let's just say you're a 26-year-old female who you're about to get married and you want to have 3 kids. You want to be a good mom, and the definition, I guess, would be by that is, once you have the child, maybe stay home a little bit appropriately within whatever guidelines of your company and state laws, etc. And you want to have 3 kids over 5 years or 8 years or whatever they want to. That's their God-given right. Is there just a certain level of career interruptions when that happens that's innate that you can't help? Or no, the unspoken truth is about, listen, these problems are there, but I'm sorry, but if I have 3 kids over 8 years and if I lose a year and a half of work within that, screw that. I should be getting the same. Will we ever be able to be a, I guess, quote unquote, good parent, right? But also be equal, and if so, how do we get there? Because that's where I think a lot of the where it gets tricky, right? So how can we get there?
Tricky.
How can we get there?
Tricky. And what I know is that women who do want to have children during this time period, what happens is it's challenging for them because they are going to be putting themselves back from their career, and the management knows that. She feels it, and it's uncomfortable. So that, again, going back to one of my suggestions is really, if you're wanting a family, really check the company you're out and the superiors and get that feel. Is there someone in there that has the CEO, does he have a working wife with career wife with 2 or 3 kids? He gets it, but someone else that may not get that. But I don't think that it's really going to change fully until more men stay home for part of the time as well. Yeah. So once we can get that, and that's the new theory, and that's the unspoken code, and it's going to be a while for that. But I think it's really important that the people that you work with, that you get their buy-in, because it's going to be challenging, and if it's not, if they can do that and be able to talk about men staying home with their kids. And I think whenever I see a man jogging with his baby and between appointments, it's like at 10 o'clock in the morning or 11 o'clock in the morning, I think that's fantastic. And I tell them, it's really great that you're spending some time with your kids. It's nice to see a dad do that too. And so the more that we can get that out there, and that's going to probably be another 10 years, but the more we can do that and have more equalization for men taking time off and being a great dad too, and accepting that in the corporate world, then it'll be easier for women too.
Yeah, and that's just amazing. So I think for men that are listening as well, it's time for us to step up as well, and I acknowledge that. One last question before we wrap up. We have a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to this podcast. We're entrepreneurial slanted, millennial slanted, but entrepreneurial slanted. So if you're an entrepreneur, and that's probably why you left corporate, because you just want to deal with a lot of the BS. What are some of the programs or perks or stuffs that they can offer male or female employees that may help at least control their little fiefdom to provide an equal playing field to their employees? So, what's your recommendation to entrepreneurs that don't want to be one of those people included in the Spoken Truth? So, what do you recommend there?
Yeah, well, this book that I have is really for just about everybody. It's it will talk about just tips that they're going to be dealing with, but the entrepreneurs, we need them, and we need them to step up to the plate and say, you know what, I'll need even maybe these employees. If I'm hiring a dad and they're having children. Like, for example, I'm still in business. I can't mention necessarily the company name because I wear two hats with my book.
Yeah.
But when one of my partners who has two young children, I push them out the door and say, go and be with your kids. Make sure that you're out there with Jamboree and take a day off. It's really important that we support that. And that's the option. That's also the opportunity of every entrepreneur out there. It's for up to them to, even for when women are, we have two women, for example, maybe that's a job sharing situation, just by the time, for the time when the children are younger. And because I was there in the business and I was able to I was very fortunate to be able to suggest to my manager, and he followed through, to take time off and have my business line ring into my own home. Okay. Why I'm saying that was important, I did that for 2 and 3 years, worked out of, both places, in home and at the office. And that was a long time ago, and they were able to do that. But why that was so important, and this is why the message is for every entrepreneur out there, is you gain really loyal employees. And if you're an entrepreneur, you need loyal employees. And so if you can, manage something where you're having a job share for 3 or 4 years while the women have younger ones at home, and they're working, if really well, they're going to be loyal to the boss. And the same thing if they have, a dad out there, suggest it. Say, you know what, if you want to take this time off and, take, 4 weeks off or 5 weeks off with your little one, report back into, as much as you can, but, I'm going to give that option to you too. So that's where we're going to see the shift start to change. And the more that happens, the more that the corporations out there are going to see that and are going to have to be competitive with that too. So it's really up to the entrepreneurs and the millennials out there to make this happen.
That's some great advice. Mariah Norris, how can we find you?
MariaNorris.com. And I have a nice website there that talks about, I have blogs out there and tips about the corporate world. And my book is also available on there for sale. That is helpful for everybody, not just the corporate world, but anyone that's in business. And I'd love to be able to have any feedback there. I have a blog, and I'm on all the sites up there. The social media is up on my website as well.
Fantastic. Mariah Norris, thank you so much. And the book is The Unspoken Truth. Thank you. That was great. Give me probably till Monday, and I'll get it up. But great job.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
And you did
and
well.
I've checked out your background. I'll have to check out your book too.
Please do. I'd really appreciate that. And I'll be in touch very shortly. And keep having Kathy send out articles because they're great.
Oh, thank